talking of Jared Goff throwing 5 picks in a game, that very much took him out of the MVP conversation. I think it's fair to say Jared Goff, based on that performance alone,
I cannot vote for Jared Goff as MVP anymore. No.
Not going to be your MVP. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page as that. Maybe if they run the table, you can have one bad game in a year, but that was as bad as a game.
That's really bad.
It feels like in the last few weeks we've seen Lamar Jackson emerge as the kind of de facto MVP. 2-time winner of this award, a guy who does put a team on his back, who has done so much to improve year on year, who continues to be one of the most electric footballers that there are out there. And yet, I watched their game this weekend. I've watched them over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I see the impact that the defense has. I see the impact that Derrick Henry has. And I just feel like people just suddenly rushing to hand this award to Lamar Jackson after just 10 weeks of the season, when there's other guys out there who are carrying their team in a much more most valuable player way. I'm just not ready to have Lamar Jackson as MVP yet.
Well, this is the stuff that, so I love to talk about the Lions and the Bills and be happy and fun like that. Those are good stories. This is the stuff that drives me absolutely crazy. And I saw this for years covering the NFL in the U.S. You'll get to week 10, you'll get to week 11, and the media, talking about the bad media.
Yeah, I mean, we're the media, right?
The fake news media. Who do I sound like? No, but in all seriousness, it is. Lamar Jackson has not won it yet. Going into this season, right, it was, Lamar Jackson was being doubted again. Was he good enough? He had the playoff issues. Obviously, factually, you vote for the NFL MVP during the regular season, the playoffs don't count. But it is not over yet, okay? Number one, Baltimore is not the best team in the AFC. They started very poorly. If I had to vote for an MVP, I would not even pick Lamar Jackson from the Baltimore Ravens. I would pick Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry defines MVP to me. You take him away from this team, Lamar Jackson has to do more. He's under more pressure. He doesn't have that backfield reinforcement. Lamar Jackson's back to being the old Lamar Jackson, who was good enough but not great when it mattered. Josh Allen right now would be my quarterback MVP. I would actually say Jaden Daniels. You take Jaden Daniels away from the Washington Commanders, they have nothing at all. But it just drives me crazy that this consensus builds, and everyone loves to go with what everybody else is saying, and Lamar Jackson becomes the hot guy for a few weeks, and now it's over. It is not over, number one. And number two, he's not even the MVP on the Baltimore Ravens. That should be Derrick Henry.
I really want to caveat by saying I love Lamar Jackson.
I love Lamar too. I'm not a Lamar hater. He's incredible.
And the way he used his legs in the Bengals in that second half was absolutely sensational. The way that they put the team... they should have won that game handily, right? The Bengals have this huge comeback. They get very close to winning it at the death. Joe Burrow, who, by the way, was the best quarterback in that game, threw 5 touchdowns for the second time this season.
Joe Burrow deserves a better record, right?
It's back to that thing about what does MVP actually mean? Most valuable player. There's no argument to me that Joe Burrow is the most valuable player on his team. He's the only reason they're anywhere near 500, let alone having any chance of being in the playoffs. I think you make a good argument for why Derrick Henry... and why he's so complimented Lamar Jackson, and why there is so much reason to take that most valuable element away from it. If I'm playing devil's advocate, though, he's in the league top 25 rushers in the NFL. That's in all running players, running backs and quarterbacks included. 26 touchdowns total, just 2 interceptions. Like, the numbers are there.
That's great.
The storyline is there if they win the AFC North. Because it's such a storyline award. And that's where I come down to Josh Allen, right? Because
So you're taking Josh Allen?
So my feeling 2 weeks ago was I was hands down taking Josh Allen. When he was on 14 touchdowns, 1 interception, absolutely carrying the team on his back, none of these weapons, they hadn't traded for Amari Cooper yet, Keon Coleman gets injured. I'm watching him week in, week out, pick teams apart, play his best season in the NFL, despite maybe the numbers not being so gaudy. I'm going... this is Josh Allen's hit his peak. This is 5 years in. He's suddenly become the best player in the NFL. The concern is he's now got 4 interceptions on the season. Those have all come in the last 3 games. He's not the reason that they beat the Indianapolis Colts. That came down to more the defense, the special teams, the whole unit working together. Josh Allen's very much a little bit like we talked about earlier in this show with what the Bills are if they beat the Chiefs this week. If Josh Allen sees this team beat the Chiefs and then goes on this late season run that sees them take the number 1 seed in the AFC, that sees them go on the road and beat these huge teams. They've got the Chiefs and the 49ers at home. They've got the Lions on the road. They've still got to play all of their divisional opponents again.
That's a really tough schedule.
If he runs through that and plays as well as he did for the first 7 games of the season, then he would be my MVP hands down. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. Nobody else can touch that.
So for me,
it's just been that little wobble the last 2 weeks that makes me go, maybe it's Lamar Jackson.
I just wish we could get back to a point where we can debate this and have fun, but we wouldn't crown it on social media, in the media, on ESPN or whatever, where we weren't crowning it until we were close to the end of the season. The fact that we're already deciding that it's Lamar Jackson, where they haven't even sewn up their division. They're not the best team in the AFC. They're not better than Buffalo right now. They're not better than Kansas City right now. Why is Lamar Jackson just given the MVP when he's basically doing what he did the previous few years, which is good, but Josh Allen's been better this year. Again, I would vote for Derrick Henry, but if as this plays out, who do you think? We also love to predict, and that's what the media does. That's fun. Who do you think ends up winning the MVP?
All right. You don't want to call it too early. You don't want to be too media-led. You don't want to be too social media-led. So maybe let's throw out somebody who's not even in the conversation right now. Let's say Josh Allen loses to the Chiefs this weekend, loses to the Lions, and falls out of the conversation. Let's say Lamar doesn't win the AFC North or has a worse second half of the season. Is there a candidate who is currently on the outskirts of that conversation who you think can jump into it and who can make their case for being the MVP by the time we get to week 18?
So somebody who I'm just keeping my eye on right now, and his stats don't blow you away, but I remember this time last year, we were all sitting around, we were at talkSPORT, we were at all these stories, and we weren't talking about the Kansas City Chiefs as being the best team in the NFL. We weren't talking about Lamar Jackson as being the MVP. We were talking about the Philadelphia Eagles as being the team in the NFL. They were, almost unbeatable. You had the tush-push, and Jalen Hurts was the MVP candidate. I would watch Philadelphia right now. And you have a huge game. This could look very outdated in about 48 hours. But Philly against Washington on Thursday Night Football. If Philly wins that game and Jalen Hurts goes on a run, because the rest of the NFC East is easy as weak. I mean, part of it is you are helped.
It's an understatement.
You were helped by your division, right? Because you're playing your division teams twice a year. So you're playing the Giants. You're playing the horrific, can't keep the sun out of their eyes, Dallas Cowboys. You're winning those games. Do the Eagles go on a run and maybe end up being the best team in the NFC, and all of a sudden Jalen Hurts is back in the MVP conversation? That's someone to watch for me. But I'm sorry, I think it does come down to Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. We're not even talking about Patrick Mahomes, which is kind of interesting. Am I missing somebody? I'm not sure who could steal
I have one. I definitely have one. But just on...
It can't be a kicker.
It's Brandon Aubrey. Just on the point of Jalen Hurts. You sit here and say to me, well, I can't give it to Lamar Jackson because of Derrick Henry. Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley is the first name I'll throw out.
Okay.
But the guy even more so, A.J. Brown, when he's out of that lineup, that offense just deflates, collapses. When he's in there, they look like one of the best offenses in the NFL. That's why Jalen Hurts right now isn't in that conversation for me. But the guy who is, because this team going into the year, they looked so undermanned on both sides of the balls. Yes, they had a high draft pick last year and brought in a potential blue chip, game-changing talent. But defensively, I'd argue they had the least talented defense in the NFL. Coaching-wise, they were unproven. And yet they had this joystick of a quarterback who has been able to do some unbelievable things. And right now, the Arizona Cardinals lead the NFC West with the Rams and Matt Stafford in there, with the 49ers who went to the Super Bowl last year, with the Seahawks who we always knew were going to be competitive. They topped that division, and Kyler Murray has been unreal this year. His ability to get outside the pocket. It was weird because I watched that game, and then I looked at the box score, and I felt like Kyler Murray had scrambled for 12 first downs and carried the offense on his own. He only had 3 runs in the whole game.
That's what Kyler Murray does.
Every time he does it, it just lights up the entire
He's a pinball.
He
is absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned him because I was last week trying to pitch a story idea that Kyler Murray was a dark horse for comeback player of the year, and I was looking at the odds and the Vegas odds, and he was about 5th, right? Kirk Cousins was number 1. Kyler Murray, for my vote, is more of the comeback player of the year than Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins made it through 8 or 9 games last year on a pretty good Minnesota team. You're with the Arizona Cardinals. You've kind of started all over. You had a major injury. He played a little last year. He didn't have very good numbers. Kyler Murray, this is what he was supposed to be when he was a number 1 pick, and he showed a lot of promise. Head coaching changes, you lose Cliff Kingsbury. Kyler Murray is one of the best athletic talents in the NFL, and that's not breaking news, but it's been an awesome reminder to watch him these last few weeks. You're exactly right about how talented he is. I just feel like you're Arizona Cardinals, nobody's talking about it. That'd be an amazing, they'd have to run the table. They'd have to win out, and then we end up having the most interesting MVP debate of all time between Kyler Murray and someone like Lamar Jackson.
You know who's third in the odds, though? Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, 1-2. Third in the odds is Patrick Mahomes.
And Patrick Mahomes is not the MVP.
What's that all about?
Why are you talking? Patrick Mahomes will tell you, don't vote for me for MVP because I have not been good enough this year. But watch him go undefeated, and the brilliant voters and the U.S. NFL media give Patrick Mahomes the MVP.